Good afternoon. I guess I get to introduce myself before I introduce the speaker. So, my name's Dan Rivera. I'm with Intel. I'm part of our industry sales group here based in Atlanta. I've been actually with Intel for 20 years, all in Atlanta. So one of the great things that I get to do and I enjoy doing is when we have people from Intel that come visit us from the West Coast and they get exposed to this great technology community in Georgia. So I'm excited to have this person here to come speak to you today, and hopefully you'll find it very worthwhile. But the other thing I just wanted to kind of point out is, as you may have heard or seen, Intel's going through our own transformation. So it's a very interesting time. We're evolving from a PC company into a cloud, big data, and now internet, things company. So it's a very exciting time. So the timing couldn't be perfect for this type of event to really kind of start to showcase some of the thought leadership that we have. So I'm not going to read this person's bio. It's in the program there, so you can read it yourself since I haven't done that yet. But his title is IoT Marketing, which doesn't really describe what he does. So I thought I'd really kind of give you the behind the curtains look of what this person really does on a day-to-day basis, to disregard the bio from my perspective. So Rick has a great opportunity to go out there and meet with all of our larger customers and really discuss, what they're doing to get the most value of their investment in Intel. So I did learn that Rick was one of the first people at Intel, if not the first, to have IoT on his business card. So as I mentioned, he's been with Intel, 5 years and is part of this transformation that's going on. So, it's exciting to see where, we've had this vision, over the last 5 years. It's really starting to come true here. And I think you really see, I think we all know what's going on from an IoT perspective, but really, how do you get the most value of what you're doing with the Internet of Things? So I would like for everybody to give Rick Lisa a warm Georgia welcome as he joins us today with the presentation.
Thanks, Dan. Well, good afternoon. It's always tough after lunch and a couple breaks. We got to get re-energized, right? Get into the discussion on Internet of Things. What our talk today is going to be about is how do we move from the hype to the reality? I think our friends at Gartner have done a good job of sort of positioning Internet of Things as being at the height of the hype curve, right? It's something we're all talking about, and the big question is how do we move from the hype, from the discussion, from what it is. You've seen example after example today of how companies are actually making use of Internet of Things technologies to bring some dynamic difference to their business. I'm going to maybe take a different approach. Yes, I'll show you examples of how we're helping companies do likewise, but I think really the challenge is on us as a community of whether or not within our own businesses, within our enterprises, within our consultancies, are we actually challenging ourselves to ask the right questions? Are we actually building the right strategies, the right capabilities to drive ourselves in this IoT space and create the opportunity that we all believe is in the promise? I mean, you've heard a number of people talking about it today. Clearly, Industry 4.0 is driving further. I mean, the whole thing is how do we move to this fourth generation of actually driving value out of automation systems and interconnected systems. And of course, China is making huge investments in this space, and they continue to make huge investments in this space. Billions of dollars are being invested by the Chinese government in city implementations, state implementations, province implementations, et cetera, in order to drive a new level of productivity efficiency, driven largely around the whole concept of megacities. As they consolidate population into smaller and smaller geographic areas, the pressures on the city to respond from a services perspective is going higher and higher. And so as you look at providing healthcare, transportation, transaction, retail, all kinds of different applications, when you look through a citywide scope, the Chinese government is really trying to figure out how to deal with these dynamics of an ever-increasing population on these megacities. Acquisitions are proceeding at a rate that we've never actually seen before. I think we're seeing a 10 times increase in the number of mergers and acquisitions, the aggregation of technologies, and we have a couple examples here where Cisco bought Jasper, PTC not only brought ThingWorx, but they also bought Exida, to bring capabilities together. And of course, Microchip buying Atmel, where you're seeing consolidation of processing technology of two actually significant players in this space coming together to bring more capability. I think what you're going to see is this is going to accelerate. Companies are going to begin to acquire more quickly all these different properties, and they're driving toward these ideas of autonomous systems, thing-to-cloud security, how to go about getting next-gen capabilities built into their products and comms, looking at 5G, looking at other types of activities. The challenge, of course, is how do you as a constituency become informed on these initiatives, begin to dial them into your thinking, and become part of the fabric that's being built around these big ideas so that you can participate in the large dollars that are going to be driven within this market. Again, Cisco has a great term for it, value at stake. The profit that can be generated from new services that are compelling, the Uber example that gets used over and over again of a new service that's been developed that everybody begins to use and pay money for, or you start looking at opportunities to build a more efficient business where you're driving profit back into your business. So the combination of revenue and profit is this idea of value at stake. Are you capitalizing on it? I think what's important when you look at these types of discussions is that the value at stake, the dollars to be generated by these dynamics, is not something that is an option. It's not something that's interesting. John Chambers has said any number of times that the Internet of Things is about survival. Those that are implementing and taking advantage of the dynamics that you're being exposed to in this symposium today are the ones that will make or break the haves and the have-nots by 2025. And frankly, those that are implementing this, I think the Fortune 100 has turned over like 50% in the last 10 years. And the ones that are taking the new slots are cloud companies, they're data center-oriented companies, they're companies that are building capability in apps and technology that's creating a distributed environment, not a centralized control environment. So this is something where I think, again, as businesses, we got to figure out how to embrace what's happening. The Internet of Things, and why now? I mean, we've been having connected appliances for decades. It's not a new concept. We've been networking devices and appliances, since actually, the internet came to be in the early 90s, and we started doing, client server back in the late 80s. So what's new? What's different? Well, the combination of the cost of bandwidth coming down exceptionally quickly, the cost of computing following Moore's law going down exceptionally quickly, suddenly we're creating a scenario where the combination of these three activities, sensors decreasing in price, bandwidth decreasing in price, and the cost of processing decreasing, is a perfect storm for a large number of interconnected things. I think it's interesting to note, we've talked about the 50 billion, 34 billion, pick your number of things to be connected. I think our friends at Gartner and IDC have said there's actually about 212 billion sensors that will be available by 2020, of which only 30 to 50 billion will be connected. Imagine a world where every person on the planet had 28 cell phones, or every person had 28 TVs, or had 28 PCs. I mean, that's the equivalent of what the Internet of Things portends in terms of a market opportunity, and it takes specific strategies to be able to engage the market. So as we look at this thing, and you're looking at the amount of data that's going to be created, the number of things to be connected, it takes strategic intent to play in this game. And so what I hope to do is give you some look at how we're approaching it from a strategic intent standpoint, and sort of help you guys through the same knothole we're going through and looking at how these things come together. Somebody said it earlier, I think again it was Gartner, that IoT is a consumer-driven event. We believe the same thing. If you look at the things that we can do as individuals using consumer technologies today, and I just gave a small sampling of all the things you can do sitting at a dinner table with your family, the CEO is asking the same question. How do I get that same visibility? How do I become as automated in my business life as I am in my consumer life? And this is really, IoT is really the first consumer-driven innovation that's changing the way business decides to act. Combine that with the number of millennials that are now coming through expecting a connected environment, an automated world, a real-time information type dynamic. It's driving enterprise behavior at the same time. So for us, IoT 2.0, which is moving from this idea of connected things to actually driving delivered value from IoT, it's a shift from technology to business value. It's also figuring out how you create value services from the data and the assets that you're tracking. Internet of Things is not about data, it's not about technology. Yes, it's about business outcomes, but at the end of the day, to be pretty mercenary, it's about money. If we can produce profit or revenue from the things we're doing with interconnected and Internet of Things based technologies, then we're actually capitalizing on the opportunity that's in front of us. We actually look at this through this lens. It's about data and assets. So if I can take an asset, collect the data off that asset, track that data and the asset it produces, secure it, expose that data to an analytics environment that allows me to start gaining control of that environment, that I can then begin to optimize, I now have the opportunity to monetize it. And to us, IoT is about making money from data and assets. And so what we're going to do, what I'm going to lead you through in the following few slides here is how are we approaching it? How are we discussing it? How are we reimagining the solution stack? And how are we helping companies move through this rather complex environment to get solutions of their own built and to basically ideate the concepts required in order to drive a solid IoT strategy? We think the IoT will evolve actually through 3 stages. Initially, it's about connecting the unconnected. You saw in one of my previous slides that 85% of the Internet of Things between now and 2020 will be done by connecting assets that are already deployed. People are not going to rip air conditioning units off roofs. They're not going to replace trains on tracks. They're not going to, tear down and build new buildings so that they can be connected. So the first challenge is how do you go through actually building a connected environment from things that are already deployed and making use of assets that are already in place. The second phase will go through more and more smart things being delivered. One of our ambitions as a silicon and semiconductor company is how do we help companies design new products, new capabilities, new features in assets that are IoT enabled? Can they connect? Can they be managed? Are they secure? Are they interoperable? Are they scalable? Do they meet the needs not only today but in the future? How do I get into a scenario where I'm not building products, technologies, and assets that I have to rip and replace 3 years from now or 5 years from now because I didn't anticipate technical innovations that will be happening? Or moreover, I undersold myself in terms of what I could actually do with these assets, and so I laid in an infrastructure that was not as capable as what I was looking for in terms of new services I would build, new capabilities. We're working with an OEM today, an original equipment manufacturer, who builds air conditioning systems. That company, when they went out looking at how can we go build a predictive and preventative maintenance activity, ideated 3 services that they wanted to deploy in order to make the service of their systems more useful to their building owners. By the time they understood exactly what they could do, exactly what the capabilities were to connect the unconnected, to start building smart capabilities, they actually started understanding that they could do 3 things more, then 4 things more, then 5 things more. And today, that same company that had 3 ideas that they wanted to drive are driving 45 services off that same infrastructure that they deployed last year. So can it grow? And we believe to get there, you've got to be looking at actually planning that kind of scale, that kind of interoperability into things that you build and design. We think sometime in the early 20s that we'll see autonomous products that can they can phone home on their own, they can self-configure, they can self-update, they'll become aware of their environment. Yeah, it sort of sounds a little bit like Terminator, doesn't it? But we believe that at the end of the day, machines will become autonomous. They will behave in their own environment and they will self-configure, self-provision, self-update, and they will react in real time with artificial intelligence to what's happening around them. So if you envision that world, how do we get there? How do we progress through that? There are challenges. There's no doubt that there's challenges. You've heard it said. And we think the number one challenge is security and trust. You've heard them talk about privacy. We've heard people talk about security. We take it rather seriously. We've embedded security capabilities from inside our chips all the way up through infrastructure, systems, and software to make sure that at the end of the day, to get underneath the security layer, you actually have to destroy the hardware, which in effect sort of defeats the purpose of the hacker or the malintended person who's trying to subvert a system. Interoperability is critical. In fact, it's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks to implementing IoT systems today. How do I get equipment version A to work with equipment version B from across 5, 6, 7 different suppliers and turn that into a homogeneous sort of interoperable open data environment where now I can look at all these different assets under a single umbrella. You've heard people talk about integration of IT and OT. I think Intel, obviously, we're pretty good at the idea of building interoperable IT equipment, but now bringing the likes of of air conditioning systems, transportation systems, healthcare systems, retail systems, asset and logistics systems, and merging them with an IT environment has challenges, especially when you look at the diversity and the differences that are built around a number of different platforms in the market. And then the last thing, of course, is analytics. I think one thing we're learning as we talk to a number of companies around the world is that the gap between what they would like to be able to do in modeling their business and building out a strong analytics environment and what they have in terms of the talent, the resources, and the relationships to build out a strong analytics capability is obviously a gap. As we move forward, you start looking at it from a business point of view, which is how can I scale the solution? I talked about that company that came up with 3 ideas that turned to 45. How do I support that? How do I make sure that I don't get into a situation where I'm on a proactive basis obsoleting technologies that I'm putting in just a year ago or 2 years ago? We were talking with a company that owns a large corporate real estate footprint, and they're going through the same problem. How do I make sure that a year from now I haven't deployed a bunch of stuff in my buildings that's no longer up to what's the best of the best in delivering that same capability a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now? Cost budget. How do I keep it all contained? Again, security. Will people trust my assets? Will my employees trust my assets? Can I trust decisions that I'm making from my business? And the real issue is we don't have enough solutions that are OEM branded, OEM backed, OEM secured, that are easily accessible, easily deployable, and consumable in an end use environment. And so these are all areas that we're actually working on and trying to help companies battle through. What we're basically saying at this point is to really unleash the opportunity, you sort of have to reimagine your environment. You have to begin to influence those players that actually make a difference in driving solutions into the market. And then you've got to take steps to adopt. So I'm quickly going to go through these 3 areas of how we're looking at this, and maybe there's some ideas in here that will resonate. We're taking a relatively simple approach, which is things. And by the way, Internet of Things to us is 2 things. It's the Internet of People and the Internet of Machines. So we look at how are we bringing machine technologies into this Internet of Things scope, and how are we enabling the Internet of People at the same time. As we pull those 2 things together, we're trying to understand how we then connect them over a ubiquitous networking environment, and then at the end of the day, apply the data center analytics and cloud technologies that allow these things to thrive and grow in an active sort of Internet of Things market and environment. Our approach is basically to create vertical solutions. We're working with a number of different companies today to actually build things that are deployable in end-use solution environments, whether in buildings, energy, manufacturing, healthcare, retail. I could go on and on. We have 8 vertical markets where we're actually working on building specific vertical market solutions that are deployable, consumable, orderable. That's actually one of the major features we're trying to build out of here, is that you can actually order it. You can go get it and put it in, and it works. And it's all those things we just talked about: secure, interoperable, scalable, et cetera. We're building that on a horizontal platform, a platform that's designed to be multi-vertical, so that as we work through with companies on how do you actually build out an IoT platform, we take you through sort of the creative approach of looking at the different elements required to build a fully operational end-to-end IoT capability. How do we help you go from the data producer to the data aggregator, to the system controller, up into the networks, up into the data center, and build that as a fully interoperable, scalable environment that allows you to actually fulfill the interests and demands of the business from that generate the dollars perspective. And along with that, what we're learning is no matter how big the company is, on whether it's us or Cisco or GE or others, what we're learning is can't go it alone. You need a rich ecosystem around you in order to be able to drive results. So this will be the only Intel product portfolio slide I'm going to put in here. Fundamentally, when you look at it from our processing products through new system level products that we're building, like RealSense, which is our 3D camera technology, Thunderbolt, which is our accelerated serial interface technologies, our storage, our 3D XPoint technologies, we're really revolutionizing a number of key strategic ingredients within the Internet of Things devices world in order to actually bring these solutions to life and drive them forward. And we're marrying that together with a rich base of security software, operating systems, and device management technologies that allow us to actually build the foundation of an interoperable environment, along with our trusted analytics platform, which is a number of algorithms that can be used by any developer to build analytics resources within any given framework. And as we said, Dan made mention of it, is that we're changing the company. So when you look at these technologies and you look at the application and the market opportunity, Intel for the past 30 years has been well known as a PC company, probably even as much so as a server company. But now what we're doing is what we're calling this virtuous cycle of growth, which is how do we connect the things, people and machines, that are creating data over networks into data analytics environments so that we can again optimize and control those environments to deliver better results and or monetizations for industry, and to augment that with both memory and FPGA technology. So this virtuous cycle is the new strategy of the company. It's just been rolled out within the last 2 months, and we're now reorganizing ourselves to this game plan. So the PC company is becoming a things and data center company focused on generating this virtuous cycle in our business. So how are we working this with the market? We're actually influencing the market. I know I've put this slide up a number of times, and all of our partners go, wait a minute, where's my logo? I want to make sure my logo's in there. This is actually a subset of all the companies we're working with. We're actually working with hundreds and hundreds of companies right now to actually bring together these various different capabilities that are required to build end-to-end sort of IoT solutions environments. And so this is a big outreach for us, and to support that outreach, number one is we're going after those developers. So like I said, the big thing for us right now when we talk to original equipment manufacturers, the maker community, the entrepreneurial community, unless we have things that are IoT enabled, there's no IoT end market that we can go build. We've got to have the things that are IoT capable in order to build IoT markets. So for us, one big opportunity is getting after the developer community and bringing them into the fold of what we're doing with a number of companies around the world. And we've actually launched 3 major foundations together with partners to start addressing the issues of connectivity, the issues of network compatibility, interoperability among systems, and to start looking at actually standardizing, bringing standardization to the very same OT environment that we've brought to the IT environment. And that's something Intel is actually pretty good at, is driving standards. We're trying to actually standardize many of the things that are driving the confusion, the disparity, and the fragmentation across the IoT space. I think combined across all 3 of these consortiums that we're driving right now, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 companies working with us to define more standards in the IoT space that will make it a more interoperable environment and a more compatible environment across multiple vendors. From an adoption standpoint, we have the same story. We're working with SAP. They showed you earlier today their SAP Intelligent Platform that ties back into their HANA Cloud. And actually, we've worked with them right now in the oil and gas industry to actually put in place different systems that are showing those types of returns, those types of innovations that people are expecting from IoT. So SAP has been a good partner of ours. They're working across multiple vertical industries with us in order to actually show their technology, their capability working with ours in collaboration with a number of hardware partners for specific vertical use cases. We're currently also working with Honeywell on first responders, so you'll see quite a bit, and I think this is like 3 of over 150 different use cases that we have around the world right now. But I needed to give you something that says we're in the game for real and we're eating our own dog food. But being able to provide a first responder environment that provides all the data, all the information, all the context of any emergency situation in real time to people as they're responding to these situations, we believe is a high value opportunity for city government and for first responders within city environments. Levi's. This is probably one of the most interesting of the applications we've been launching here lately. We're now working with Levi's to asset tag all of the products that they sell within a given store, so that they now know from the time of the product is manufactured, a pair of Levi jeans, to the time it goes out the front door of a store, they actually know where that product was every step of the way. They know what's on the floor in the front room, they know what's on the floor in the back room, they know what's in the fitting room, and they're helping retailers actually move their people away from maintaining the store assets to interacting with their customers. And what they're seeing is a real dramatic difference in the way the sales are going through on their products. They're actually to see a more consultative environment in the store as opposed to a simple transaction relationship with customers in the store. And again, we're enabling that. I could go on. And again, subset of it, we have hundreds of engagements, actually thousands of engagements around the world right now where we're going through like activities with companies. So how do you get in the game? The first thing is we believe that there's 9 strategic areas within IoT. And the challenge we would place on every person in this room is, do you have these strategies built into your companies? Are you capable in all 9 of these areas? Do you have a game plan to engage these 9 areas proactively? And what we're finding is most companies don't. So what we do, and I know this sounds unusual for a chip company, but we come into companies, whether they be OEMs, integrators, end users, to us it doesn't matter. We are helping companies through these 9 strategies. We're actually helping you go through the idea of, do you have a data strategy? Do you know what your data producers are? Do you know how to move the data from point A to point B? Do you have a way to normalize data, which actually is part of the device management strategy as well? In some cases, these are all interconnected. But do you have a security strategy? It's not just about security in terms of the data from point A to point B. Bottom line is, if you can't trust the source of the data, you can't trust the outcomes. So how do you build a secure environment from top to bottom? We lead companies through that discussion. We own a number of security assets. We apply our assets, but we also apply partner assets as we go through this. You can't build IoT without a cloud or data center strategy. So again, we're asking companies, partners, do you have a data center strategy? Do you have a cloud strategy? How are you applying that to your business? Analytics. Can't get to an IoT outcome without an analytics game plan. You got to have a game plan. This is something you have to plan for. It's not something that you can just pick up and run with. Do you have analytics partners? Are you working with the right partners? Do they understand your business? Do they know how to model your business, right? By the way, that goes with a workforce strategy. Flip all the way to the other side. Do you have the talent in your company to actually implement these IoT game plans, these strategies, these efforts? Do you have data scientists? Do you have data analytics? Do you have a mixture of millennial and new generation people that will help your older generation people, so to speak, or your legacy employees move through this IoT dynamic? Bring the right level of capability to your company. Networking and connectivity. Communications, of course, a big part of it. You can't do this without a network. You can't do it without connectivity. And that's all the way down from the data producer and the protocols they run, the connections that they have, the physical connections. How do you manage all those things? How do you deal with literally tens of thousands of different protocols across many, many different environments, across many different applications, yet have a game plan to deal with that and reconcile that as a company? Device management. We can't put 50 billion things or 200 billion things on a network and not have a means to control them. Turn them on, turn them off, provision them, update them, go through all the different aspects of keeping that population, that fleet, if you will, alive on a day-to-day basis. And lastly, a storage strategy. You saw a slide earlier where we talked about 44 zettabytes of data being being collected and distributed across an IoT infrastructure by 2020. That's 13 times the amount of data that's been collected to this point in history. So when you start talking about the amount of data we're going to produce, you can't just think you're going to deal with it. You've got to have a strategy to deal with what you're going to store at the edge, what you're going to store in the cloud, in the network, on the distributed appliances and the intelligent appliances in your businesses and your partners. Where's the data going to go, and how are you going to store it and maintain it? So we believe these 9 strategies are core and critical to building up an IoT game plan within each and every enterprise and with each and every company, no matter what your role is. If you're a manufacturer, if you're a business, if you're an agency, a government, whatever the case may be. So what do we encourage you to do? Act. I think the biggest thing we see right now is people look at the complexity, companies look at the complexity of IoT, and they're looking for that perfect answer for when can I do this such that it's easy to do? And the answer is if you have the right partners around you, it will be easier to do than if you don't. And part of what we do when we talk with companies around the 9 strategies and picking those 1 to 2 use cases that are relevant and impactful to a business is we work really hard at marrying together our capabilities with our partners' capabilities with the target venues' capabilities in order to sort of build the perfect storm of experience that allows us to quickly implement proof of concepts, get them in the ground, and get them producing the results we're looking for and measuring results as to whether or not we're getting the kind of capabilities we want and the kind of results we want out of these systems. So seek out collaborators to fill those solution gaps. We think that's important. Get those 1 or 2 opportunities that you think are going to really make a difference for your business. Let companies like us and our partners help you through the 9 strategies, through these issues of technical and business point of view challenges. We're addressing it every day and we're helping companies get through them. And I think last but not least, if you can encourage a focus on standards, getting to a collection of interoperability measures that show how these disparate systems actually work together and drive that requirement back into your vendor base, back into your partner base, we think these 3 things will actually move us faster out of sort of talking about and thinking about IoT to actually implementing it. And I think, for us, it's about acting. If you're interested in working with us to come and help you, please contact us. We have our local people here in Georgia. Dan was up here earlier, and we'll be happy to help you. But you can also go to our IoT website. We have tons of use cases there and examples and partners, and we've got a rich ecosystem all ready and willing to step in and help any company move forward in the space to actually go through those things of reimagining the platform, influencing the ecosystem, and getting adoption built. So thank you for your time and attention. It looks like I'm almost right on time. I'll be here for the rest of the day. If I can answer any questions or help with any issues, please find me. We'll help you out. We're anxious to work with everybody in the room and move this forward. Thank you.